I am here with director Chris Renaud to talk about Despicable Me 4 coming out on digital. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Allison. How are you doing today?
I am great. Thank
Great.
you. All right, let's talk about Despicable Me 4. You directed, co-directed 1 and 2, and then
Yes.
did not 3, but why back for 4?
Well, for me, I just think felt like a good opportunity. I'd been a producer on Minions Rise of Gru, and, sort of working with the director, Kyle Balda, on that one, and sort of was getting my hands back. I'd worked on The Secret Life of Pets 1 and 2 in the interim. And so that was an opportunity to get my hands dirty, for lack of a better word, in the Despicable Me Minions world. Um, and we had a very funny script from Mike White. Even though we changed a lot, we had a great foundation. And so, which I had worked a little bit with him on, and with Chris Meledandri as well, as we developed that. So, when it came time to direct it, I was like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Get me, back into the world. And yeah, I think, you see that a lot with, people, obviously I had a hand in, creating the world and the characters, and it gave me
Yeah,
an opportunity, because being a producer is, at least in the way I, am, is obviously a bit more hands off. You're not the day to day, making the design
right.
decisions and all that stuff. So it just felt like a great opportunity to get back into the world.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're glad you did because it is a great movie.
Oh, thank you.
What was the reason for incorporating I love the superheroes and then everybody's against the superheroes, which seems to be a trend lately in movies? So tell me a little bit how that came about.
Right. Until Deadpool Wolverine, right?
Right, exactly.
Look, well, one thing is that we had been talking about giving the minions superpowers for some time, since
Okay.
Despicable Me 2.
Oh.
When we were playing with ways of what was the villain El Macho going to do with the minions?
Mm,
Obviously we landed on the purple evil minions, but we were thinking, well, would they be transformed? Would they have powers? Blah blah blah. And we actually pulled out those drawings from Eric Guillon, to take a look at what our conversations were at the time. So it was an interesting idea, and clearly, whether it's a costume or a physical transformation or getting big, we love to transform the minions. It's almost like a Looney Tunes kind of,
yeah.
that's a Daffy Duck as Robin Hood. So anyway, so we'd had this idea for a while, but we were fortunate, these movies take a lot of years, obviously, but we were fortunate in the moment we were in culturally, that the minions being the minions, we could make a comment about superheroes through their ineptitude. You know what I mean? Like just this
Yeah.
idea of, like, because initially, because there's been a lot of comedic superhero material done, some of it very good. Uh,
Hmm.
like, how do we make it funny and feel different? And eventually our way in was just, to answer that question, was just make them minions. And that's kind of what you see. You know what I mean? It's like the
Yeah.
montage scene where they're fighting crime. The inspiration for me was the great scene in the Richard Donner first Superman film. But of course, in that, Superman's successful.
Right.
So in our version, we had to find ways that the minions could fail upward,
Hmm.
as we like to say. And that became the way that we could define how the minions would be superheroes.
Well, I really like the way you. At first, we were kind of like, "Oh, they didn't make them into superheroes," and then when they made them into superheroes that failed and people hated them, I was like, "Okay, I get it now."
And then what's funny, what I like about where we landed at the ending, or well, I shouldn't say that actually. This is what I'll say. What I like is where we even landed, is that in some ways they don't even use their superpowers. You know what I mean? They just
Right.
can't help but be themselves.
That's
And
true.
maybe that's their superpower, is just being minions at the end of the day. It's not heat vision or stretching or anything like that. So that's what I like about the characters.
Yes, when they fail spectacularly.
Exactly. We call it failing upward.
I like that. So far in theaters, this movie has made over $800 million, and now we're coming to digital. Why now? What was the purpose of it? Why not wait a little longer? Tell me what the thought process was on with that.
Well, I think on that you'd have to ask people more at the studio than me, to
Above
be honest
your
with you.
pay grade?
But yeah, exactly, above my pay grade. Um, what I've been told, and I'm going to repeat that,
Oh,
and I
good idea.
think that what I'm seeing basically supports this argument, is that in this window, even with something that is as successful as Despicable Me 4 has been, the PVOD, or the digital release, much like the DVD release, does not has a negligible, statistically negligible impact on box office return. And that seems to be holding true. Because it's interesting, my many years in this business, what I've seen, and I'm amazed actually, is that when you after like the first 2 weeks, I always say the first week is about the marketing, the second week is about word of mouth.
Yeah.
Um, After those first 2 weeks, you almost can mathematically predict to a pretty narrow margin of error what it's ultimately going to make. Certainly
Hmm.
in the United States and Canada. It's a little trickier, outside of
Yeah.
in international territories, and anywhere it can be subject to storms and whatever. There's all kinds of
Yeah.
things that can impact it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I would say that's become the strategy, knowing that digital release, again, like the DVDs, and that's part of this too, is part of the overall um, plan on how these films are viewed by an audience.
Okay, so on this digital release, we get two mini Minion movies. What can you say about those?
They're both really, really fun. I mean, I think that it's fun to put the minions again. It's very much a Looney Tune idea, right? Like where can we put them? And they're almost like little standalone, pieces. I don't know how many we've done to date. It's a lot, and we always accompany these digital releases with some fun extra content, which typically are these shorts.
Yeah.
In some cases, we've even the one short, Mower Minions, was released as a on the head of The Secret Life of Pets, which was
Mm,
great. So that was very old school, like putting a short and then the film,
yeah.
like back in the day. So no, they're both terrific. One is about guys sort of celebrating his birthday, but he doesn't want to, and he's kind of caught in this. I don't want to give it away. And then the other one
Okay.
is about a guy who's playing a video game that gets the better of him. That's all I'll say. But they're super fun,
Uh,
and really play like traditional cartoons, which the Minions really lend themselves to that kind of format.
yeah, and they really did from the beginning. When you first started with Despicable Me, were you surprised at how big the Minions became as opposed to the main characters of the film?
Yes and no, and no, I'll say, because I started my career not my career, but doing this work, working with the Scrat in Ice Age 2 and 3, and I did a
Mm,
lot of the material that as a storyboard artist that ended up in both of those films, and clearly that character was just loved more than the main characters. I mean, the thing about the original Ice Age, the story, the original story, the narrative was so good. And then,
yeah,
we had, and the Scrat was little punctuation. And then what started to happen is that the Scrat got more and more important.
yeah,
So what I'm getting at is that I knew that, and I think a lot of people know this. You see this. I mean, the tradition of a Disney having a little character on a little cute
yeah,
character on somebody's shoulder. If you can nail that support character
yeah.
as a piece of comedy, it pays huge dividends for the main characters. What I would say is I didn't, so I knew that was a goal, and both Pierre and I knew that the Minions were something special, I mean, even from design, storyboards, animation, at every phase they improved. It
Mm,
was just a great core idea. Um, what I would say I didn't expect maybe is like how big it's gotten.
yeah.
And I think that, I certainly the decision to make Minions in 2015 as a standalone, and that movie worked so well. Um, which again, I think is very difficult to pull off.
Mm,
If you made a Scrat standalone movie, it'd be tough.
yeah.
But just their universality, their universal quality, not to be and not to drop the universal name, but their universal quality, I just think is what makes them work so beautifully, as characters, because, even the Scrat is a squirrel going for an acorn, and there's kind of a limit there.
Yeah.
Having worked on some shorts with the Scrat, and I did my short, I tried to take him to a new world with a time machine, but there's a limit to what you can do. Well, the minions are practically limitless. I mean,
They are.
they're invulnerable for all we know. You're not bogged down by, who they are, and, anything really, and
Yeah.
so it's a very, as a character set, it's extremely fun and liberating to work with. And I can tell
Yeah.
you, in this movie, if we had trouble with the scene, we're like, well, let's figure out a way to get the minions. And it's almost like a magic trick that we are so lucky to have at our disposal,
Yeah.
because, whether it's, a narrative sleight of hand, or gosh, we could use a laugh here. They they're
Yeah.
they're they're they don't,
They're
we have to sometimes, what's the word, monitor ourselves. And, when we even did that after one of our last previews, we took a whole minion gag out. We just didn't
oh,
need it.
yeah.
It got a laugh, actually, but it just wasn't something we needed. And
Okay.
so sometimes that happens too. But as a something to have access to while you're making one of these films,
Yeah.
it's invaluable.
Valuable. Mm-hmm.
Because the
Ah,
audience,
well,
this is the great spot, right? Because the audience wants to see them, and they want to laugh, they want to love it, and that's, gosh, that's the best place you can be.